Hello and welcome to Game Brain, a board game podcast about our gaming group. I'm Ben Mandelker, and I'm here today with the luminaries, Trey and Jordan. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing, Ben?
Doing well.
Great to be here, Ben.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
I'm a
two.
luminary?
Yeah, you guys are both luminaries.
That sounds like a good board game title. Luminaries.
Yeah.
Designed by Lumen.
Designed by Lumen, the Agricola aficionado.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Luminaries.
Lumen Sperling, yes.
Luminaries definitely sounds like a game that would be released by the Italian designer. Like
Yeah, it's
you
a
are,
dice
like,
drafter.
and you're entering an academy about wizardry or something. And,
Yeah.
you
This
know,
game writes itself.
it's a great game. I already bought it.
It's just Alma Mater, but fixed. Alma Mater fixed.
But not just like
re-released
like
as Luminaries.
Yeah. I mean, I'd buy it. I'm excited to buy it already.
It's a great title.
Luminaries.
Quick, let's get that entry into BGG. Quick.
It's probably already a game. So hi everyone. Today we're just going to be talking about a bunch of games we've been playing recently, and then we're going to do a deep dive on Kutna-Hora, which we've been talking about recently enthusiastically on the podcast.
Right.
So we're gonna go hard. We're gonna go hard with Kutna-Hora, and we're gonna really break it all down and talk about what we like about it, etc.
We're going to mine its depths.
Ooh, yeah. It's a game about silver mining or just mining.
We've started to go down the pun route. And I blame
Started
you.
to.
Blame you, Ben.
I've been in the pun route.
Okay.
I'm in the route. So why don't we
Because
talk?
that's podcast silver.
Okay.
Okay.
There
It's
we
not
go.
No.
Yeah, well,
Kutna-Hora.
I
City of
appreciate the silver lining on that cloud.
All right.
Don't take this as us saying you shouldn't try again, Trey. You should definitely
But-
try again.
Well, you know, not all puns like really land, but that's the fun of it, is that you just throw shit at the wall and
Yeah.
see what you can come out with, because every now and then you find something amazing, you know?
This
Trey
was a perfect December morning for me
Why is that?
because got to watch a big Liverpool comeback
Yeah.
on the road, 2 goals in the last 10 minutes while simultaneously playing Agricola on my phone.
were playing
with friends.
Agricola
While I was playing Agricola with friends on my phone. So it was like the perfect mix of
Yeah.
Saturday morning. The sun streaming in the windows with the low winter light, you know.
Did you say you were driving while this was happening?
No, I was not driving.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Did I say-
I don't know why.
Sitting on the couch.
In my mind, for some reason, I had it that you
driving.
were driving.
I'm watching Premier League and playing Agricola. Although it was last night, we didn't know how Matt got some moves in while he was driving over to Tom's, and like he was making moves while driving.
That's right. 5 minutes before he arrived at Tom's, he had made a move.
Like, is he here? How did he do that? Hey Siri,
Yeah.
take start player.
I'm sure it was very safely at a red light and no one was honking, and there's not like, you know, he did not leave a wake of death and destruction in his Agricola game in real life, you know?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
That was
All right, lesson learned.
our
Lesson learned.
new podcast co-host. I won't say her name, otherwise she'll probably speak up again.
Yes, lesson learned.
By the way, so the three of us, we had some fun gaming last night. We did not. Okay, I know we're not supposed to talk about this game, and I don't even want to talk about this game, generally speaking. But I do have something on my mind to say about this game
Okay.
of Avalon,
Oh, okay.
because you know we talk about Avalon all the time.
Yes,
But
we've
really-
tried to dial it back.
What's really funny is I'm not like the biggest Avalon. I've said
You've
it
been
many
a
times.
tremendous sport.
I know, but I have fun with the group when we play it, because I like to be an agent of chaos, or I like to just like mess with people. And it's, for me, it's kind of like playing a video game where, like an old school video game where you're like, okay, how far can I go before I lose all my lives? And so it's not about like, oh yes, I won at Avalon tonight. Yes, I'm awesome. I've got a huge.
Is that my reaction?
Well,
Okay.
You know what? Your reaction is more subdued than that. But that's
I was going to say smug.
No.
No? Okay.
No. But I'm just like, but I also enjoy, we're friends, and so I enjoy being with the friends in that act. And so last week, Jordan and I were on a team, and within seconds we were called out as being bad guys. Like,
Within seconds. And I feel bad because the prior week, I don't think you were there, but I was on an evil team. Our third team member was Chris. And Chris and I were on an evil team the previous week, and I was also immediately identified as evil.
Right.
And ruined the game for Chris. So I have a spotty record right now at Avalon.
Yeah,
But I
and-
still enjoy it.
well, what actually had sucked for me was that so Tom, Tom was like, well, I knew, Ben, you were bad because when you were bad, you were low energy. I had received some news that had put me in a low energy state. So I was like, shoot, like this news has actually worked against me in this game of Avalon. So I was in an authentic low energy state. By the way, everything's fine. That sounded way scarier than it was. Everything's fine.
I'm glad.
But like, I definitely entered game night in a sort of distracted state. Which, by the way, I have to say, it was so warming to come into game night and everyone's like giving me hugs, just like a normal thing. And it was just like, I really needed that like little bit of love that in that moment. And again, I'm saying everything's fine, but like going into game night, I was distracted. And so it worked against me, which was funny in that. So anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is that Jordan and I, we were called out immediately, and it was just sort of like an unsatisfying way to spend 45 minutes. And so we were going to game night last night. We're like, we're really excited to play Avalon because we just want to we want to fuck with everyone.
Ourselves a little bit, you know.
You had a plan.
Yeah.
I brought dark sunglasses and a hoodie.
Yeah.
Jordan
I was
had
going to be like a
props.
poker player at a table.
You had a Phil Locke
props.
look.
I
Yeah.
had plans of how I was just gonna just troll the table or something.
Yeah.
And then we didn't play Avalon after all that. So
You had to get Matt in on your plan because I think if you had
I was trying
recruited
to-
him to troll, he would have been,
he would have
down.
100% been
Yeah.
in. But I'm still, despite that, it's more important to me that everyone at the group at the table is playing a game that they want to play. You know.
Yeah. My comment on Avalon is playing with this group, I think you need to protect. It's not as important to win an individual game as it is to protect the range of what you'll do if you're good or evil. You need to be self-interested. Even if you're good, you have to play a little shady so that when you're evil, if you're going to play that same way, you can hide. So my new
I
strategy.
think
is
as you
going to be
play
to
the game
protect my
more,
range.
you will change your stance on that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I think that okay, here's my two cents. Avalon strategy basic is you're always doing an impersonation of basic blue, and so I think that introducing some shadiness is going to work against you. What you actually want to seem is trustworthy and curious at all times. Like if there's a default and you're saying, what's that poker default? That default is basic blue. It's curious. I don't know. I'm searching. I don't have special information.
These are all lies because I literally have that every time I'm good, I literally have that reaction. Everyone's like, well, Ben's obviously bad. So this is all lies.
So
and
I
push
try.
back.
This is what you
that.
try for.
I've tried for that and I've failed, and so I'm moving on to because I'm identifiable as shady no matter what. I have
Same.
to be.
Jordan
that
and I
level
are-
I
of
think
shady
you are
when
now
I'm
subscribing
also
to the
good.
Canonex school of
Wow.
Smoke
playing.
show.
Of the smoke screen.
Smoke screen.
Definitely not smoke show.
He's a handsome man. He's very
He
charming.
is adorable. So anyway, that's
So instead of Avalon last night, we played. Well, you played Nucleum, Trey.
yeah, Trey, what did you think about Nucleum this play?
So this is my second play, first complete one, and I feel like
Oh.
because I didn't make it through the first time
Right.
that it happened, and so I got a full teach from Matt, who is just fantastic at teaching board games, and I guess I get it now. I get the hype.
Yeah.
I still have my quibbles. I was also like a strange drunken buffoon bouncing through that game and somehow emerging victorious
you win?
without even knowing what I was doing, kind of thing. So it certainly wasn't because of skill or understanding of the game. So I don't know if that's a positive on the thing, but I kind of get it. I do see, yeah, it's like half barrage, half brass. That map to me is very intimidating at the beginning. The game feels incredibly tight.
It's a big garish map also.
Yeah.
It's like this big, it's like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles-esque, right? It's like this bright green and then purples
And orange, yeah.
It's like 90s. It's like, I don't know what was going on with that map.
Yeah, it's kind of power gritty, whatever. But like at the beginning, it feels so tight, and I feel like your hardest decisions are right off the bat. So it's kind of Splatter-esque in that way a little bit, where I'm like, I can't do anything, and then later on it opens up and you can kind of do anything. So it's one of these weird when do you get over the hump games, but it felt very intimidating at the beginning, and then somehow it worked out. But I'll continue to play it. I have a bias against games that I kind of think of as make 'em ups. Like that's the term I use when you've kind of created some fantasy explanation for the mechanisms in your game. I do like it better when we're kind of representing something real. I know, and
wait,
you're
are
gonna
you
find
sa- wait,
perfect
are you
examples
saying-
of how I'm a hypocrite.
Wait, are you saying that power plants in an alternate history timeline that use special materials in Saxony is not based a compelling theme for you?
This does not recreate the growth of the nuclear power industry in Eastern Europe during the Cold War. You know, like I might have like.
But also, sometimes there's like a slight difference between like in Barrage. Barrage also has some steampunk element to it, which doesn't make any sense.
Which makes no sense.
But I feel like it's so on the fringes. It's literally just, I think, in the art, really, and the art and the flavor. But the actual game is just like making energy.
But
out
to
of
me,
it.
that's a negative. Like Barrage is so good that you can look past that kind of steampunk nonsense that they tacked on.
But it feels more germane to Nucleum.
I agree. It feels more germane to Nucleum because there's really, you're using uranium to power nuclear energy plants. I think the only fictional part of it is that supposedly it's
the links,
the time period.
They didn't have rail before. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
But
it's
the
like, what's
Nucleum,
time period of
yeah.
the nuclear plants. Well,
But this is why, like, for brass works better for me because I feel like, this actually does represent a certain phase of the Industrial Revolution and the this move from moving goods by canals to trains and how these cities built up, and it was all based on the cotton trade. Like all of that stuff feels like love that theme.
Yeah, totally.
Works so well with the mechanisms. And here we're doing a little bit of a make 'em up. And listen, I'm fine with plenty of make 'em ups. Like we put stuff in space all the time to make it a make 'em up.
Terra Mystica.
Yeah. So
it's almost like there's a little bit too much real life in there and not enough. It's like either you go all real life, drawn from real life theme, or you go something totally fake like a Terra Mystica. But if you have like some sort of weird hybrid, it sort of doesn't like land right.
Let me put it this way: when Matt, who's an excellent teacher of the game, at the beginning of it is going to say, "Here's what we're doing in the game. Here's the story." I think in Nucleum, that's kind of a hard story to tell.
Yes.
What are you saying? Okay, we're building out our roots and building buildings in order to generate power to kind of turn the lights on in these buildings, and we get points for that.
Right, establishing
building buildings and energizing them. Yeah, I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
By the way, that's actually not a crazy. I mean, if you were to say, we are working in the power industry and we need to like create power infrastructure to turn so that way these.
But that's what I'm saying. Like something like Power
electricity.
Grid is a more straightforward story, right? We're expanding our power grid from city to city, and we're generating power with different types of power stations. You know, coal, nuclear, green. Like that. Thematically, it's an easier story to tell.
I think Nucleum tells a better story though than Barrage, because in Barrage, a lot of your points come from just building stuff. Oh, I built something and now I'm going to get 7 points per turn. What is that really representing? You know what I mean? Whereas in Nucleum, almost all
what does
your
that
points-
in Barrage? What's the 7
I think that would
points per
make.
turn?
I think that actually makes
the
sense.
income on the fourth column of everyone's board has like 7 points.
Oh,
Because
the
you've
income.
established.
Yeah,
I think that makes
Income
sense.
every
Well, you've
turn.
established like
That's
an
like an
infrastructure.
established. You've run
like-
power to certain resident
Yeah,
communities,
you have
so
a-
that's a source of
You have an
points
influence
now,
in
yeah.
the political world because you've. But I mean,
In
either
Nucleum, the points
way,
come directly from, I've energized this building. That's going to get me points.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You're going to energize. You're going to get points for the energy, and there's going to be points for the building later on. It's fine. It's
Okay,
fine.
right.
It's fine.
I have to say, I've only played it once, and I played a 2-player game. I think I mentioned it last week. I really like it a lot. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot wait to play it more. I want to play it 3. I want to play it 4. I want to play it a lot. I want to get a bunch of reps in. But that being said, playing Nucleum made me appreciate how good Brass and Barrage were. Did I say this last week? I can't remember it. I never know.
A little
what I
bit,
say.
yeah.
But like, as good as Nucleum is, you just see how excellent Brass and Barrage are, like, because Brass and Barrage just do what Nucleum does in such a cleaner way, like Nucleum, there's like a lot of stuff going on. And once you like learn the stuff, it's like fine. And it's great.
such a tough standard to compare to those two,
Right.
right?
No,
like,
it's not fair,
It's an
but it makes
excellent
you-
game. It's just not, hey, one of these all-time classics.
But those two games like came up with an innovative approach to board gaming, but they just came up with innovative ideas. Like this is how, like, in terms of networking, in terms of creating, generating electricity as a concept or energy. And so Nucleum is really great, but it's not those games.
I agree. I've played now, I think 5 or 6 games of Nucleum, and that feeling just gets stronger as you play more why am I continuing to explore this when I could go and play Brass and Barrage, for me at least. But I will say the one thing that I really love in Nucleum that makes the game more interactive and is a unique sort of aspect to that game is jointly building rail networks. Brass doesn't really have that. Barrage doesn't have that at all. And so I really like that aspect. I think that's a really interesting piece.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think there's
And also,
not
like-
a ton to love.
And also like the idea of like not only you're building rail networks, but that you are actually like destroying potentially important pieces of your
Oh,
action
yeah,
tiles.
no, the action tiles
that's
and
the-
using them for rail, like that's brilliant.
Yeah,
I think
it's
that's a
really
really fantastic thing. And also, like, I'm still learning to understand that game. There were times in that game yesterday where I was salty because I thought Chris was blocking me, and in fact, he was completing a rail, but he did it in such a way so that I didn't get a bonus. And I had this whole plan of how I was going to do it myself or whatever, but it felt like, oh, you're actively playing against me. Why are you doing that type of thing? And it turns out it's like, oh no, that actually did help me.
Yeah.
And I had to apologize for my saltiness, or come as close to an apology as I'm capable of.
Yeah, I saw your rail at the end of the game, and I think it was like 3 or 4 cities long that you and Chris worked on together. And if you had to do that alone, it would have cost you like 10 action tiles. It would have been undoable.
And it was a tempo thing because like we were both into Praga, which is like the main double score city early on, and other people weren't. So
Yeah, and
benefited
people
me.
are saying that the game is a heads down or multiplayer solitary game, but it felt pretty interactive to me, and I felt like
there's plenty on the board.
And actually, in the game I did play, I was playing with my friend Guy, and he was not paying attention really to the map as much. Like he did a great job. I mean, he beat me, he like killed me, but he wanted to go into certain cities, and by the time he realized he wanted to go in those cities, he realized, oh, I had blocked him fully out of it, and that like it's really important to actually make sure you get on those train
plenty
lines.
of real
Like,
estate
you have to like
to be grabbed.
There's a
Right.
huge amount of urgency with that map, and that feels very interactive.
Yeah, I think the chief areas of interaction are there are a few cities where it's like 1 or 2 ways in, and if those are blocked out of you, you're not getting into that location. And then also the most advanced of each of the 3 types of buildings scores for every instance of that type of building within its network. And if you can shut down someone's network, you'll cost them a lot of points. And I know that's happened in a few games we've played where someone's been blocked out and they lost maybe like 30 points, like a massive quantity of points. And if you can arrange to block someone like that, that's a pretty advantageous.
Did you guys see that there's an expansion coming? Nucleum Australia?
Yeah.
That's coming down the pike. I don't know anything about it except that it's coming. You know, even if it's just a new map, that's always exciting. I'm sure that there'll be new. I have to imagine there'll be new sets of like projects, which are like your technologies, because those are all asymmetric.
Yeah, different map.
So that'd be great if there's more. Because actually, one thing that surprised me was that there's only 4 sets of those, and I sort of expected that there'd be like tons of different options with the technologies like that, but there weren't. So I would not be surprised if we get more sets of those. We'll have the map, maybe some other little stuff.
Yeah,
There's some modules, yeah.
I want to play the game some more because that's. I think we were flirting with the idea of talking about asymmetry a little bit at some point on the podcast, and this is an example of like there's some massive asymmetries in the player powers of that game, and like first plays, I don't know what other people are doing, but it did seem quite different, and it just made me wonder like, is the asymmetry necessary so that the moves are not scripted and wrote? Like, do you need that so that everyone's playing a slightly different game? Would it be so much more boring if your player boards were more balanced? Right. And I don't know the answer to that.
I like when games have like you can all play from the same starting position, but there's also an asymmetric option. I like when there's sort of like
I like when there's that option.
you know.
Yeah.
I think I just looked at the Australia page, and it's going to include also a bidding variant for selecting your set of technologies.
Okay.
So if they're not, to the extent they're not balanced, you can bid for them. Yeah.
Well, when you've played one time, you're completely ready to bid for a set of tiles.
Not quite yet. Not quite yet.
You can get there. So while you guys were playing Nucleum, we played Horseless Carriage, which I was very excited about because I have not been able to play for
been
months and
boxed
months.
out.
I've been boxed out. I missed my window, but Jordan was extremely kind, even though Jordan has been dying to play Imperial Steam for many months as well. Like you played it before, but you've been aching to get it to the table. That you were like, you know what, like you brought Horseless Carriage, and I felt like in many ways you did that for me, so I'm very appreciative.
It's no problem. I was happy to get it back to the table, and yeah, I know you've been wanting to play it since it came out.
Yeah.
And you've never played it before, right?
I'd never played it except for I had done like a like one third of a hot seat game online. There's an online implementation, which is pretty good. So it was really fun. We played with Paul, who also
had not played
never played it. So the three of us played, and I was just really glad to see what this game was all about. It's such an interesting, like, strange game, right? Like the way it all works together, like this half polyomino puzzle,
Hard
half
puzzle.
market,
Hard
Oh, like I had read about how like so many people online were like, "Oh my goodness!" Like part of this game is that the first thing you do is you basically trip out the door, like you make a mistake right away. And I was like, it was left and right. I was making mistakes with my factory, but I mean, everyone's making mistakes. So, it's all like who can weather the storm of their terrible factory and like generate, turn that into, sales of cars.
Right. It felt in our game, because we're all relatively inexperienced players, like we were trying to adapt our factory for the requirements of the market. But I think at a higher level, what you want the game to be is adapting the market to fit your factory best.
Mm-hmm.
Like, competing with other players to adapt the market.
Yeah, you can go either
what
way.
you already produce.
Right.
Right. But I think you did a very beautiful job of reacting to what the market was going to shape up to be. And it was really fascinating to watch, actually, because you created demand in certain areas that only you could fill, and you filled it for, like, you were selling sports cars for like $8. That's the most you can get for a car. So you killed it. It was fun to watch.
I actually, no, I never sold a sports car for $8. It felt like it was $8, but it wasn't. But it was interesting because I really didn't know what to do. And for a moment there, I felt like I was falling behind because you guys were able to produce more cars, and I was only producing one car. And then I'd boxed myself into a corner. And there were tons of trucks all over the market, and so Paul and Jordan were going at it with trucks.
Truck battle.
So I decided I would go at it. I was like, let me bring some sports cars into the mix. But on top of that, I had, like, I don't know. I developed my technology in a way I could see that there was going to be like these two aspects that the buyers would want that I was already fairly high up on, and that if I could just like keep plugging those, I could actually then I could service a market quadrant that neither of them would be able to service. And so therefore I developed that quadrant, and then I serviced it. And as a result, because it was a higher up quadrant, those cars were worth the most, which also simultaneously brought the values of the cars that you guys could service down a little bit.
Right.
And then, yeah, it just like worked out. It worked out that there was just one round where I just had like a huge amount of sales, and then I was able to create some nice distance. And then after that, I was still fairly consistent with you guys, but I had just created that separation and then, rode my dysfunctional factory to the end.
Highly functional factory.
It was
I
functional.
will say, Paul and I built our factories too similarly, I think. We had similar... we had the ability to produce similar cars that had similar levels of things customers cared about. So we were fighting over the same demand. And
That sounds good for Ben.
Yeah,
Right,
your cars
I
were differentiated.
I did sport, and the thing was,
You had to market to yourself, yep.
Yeah, I was able. There was always these like two sports cars that were popping up, and I was just getting them. It was like $12 basically, and I had heard going into the game like, oh, this is a good splatter, but it's not as good as the others because it's the most multiplayer solitaire. But I found I was looking at everyone's factories quite a bit. Like, I was looking to see what you could produce. I could see what specs you had on your cars. I was seeing like, have they gotten to sports cars yet? Should I be worried about this? Can they get into this quadrant? So I was definitely surveying the table more than I think people had led me to believe I would be.
It feels like with Horseless Carriage, there's just more separation, but there's more work you have to do to get to the place of interaction. You have to go through your own player board. You have to be able to analyze someone else's player board to really see where the interaction lies. Whereas with a lot of other splatters, it's right there. It's it's already a knife fight in a phone.
It's more in a common board, kind of like the knife fight in Food Chain Magnate is the map.
Right.
I mean, there's a certain amount of tech, like who's going to outprice other people, but at least it's out in front of you. I love a good market.
Yeah.
Like I think you
Yes.
love a good market.
Love a market.
And I think this is the thing that I remember best about Horse's Carriage is the demand market in the game, which I think is kind of brilliant. Like
Yeah.
it's expression of here's the market for cars. You can kind of see where it is, that you see what people are looking for, and then you can kind of answer it. And you can, like you said, Jordan, you can shape it.
Yeah.
So that to me was easily the most interesting thing, because the puzzle aspect of your factory, tough puzzle, really high skill cap on that. I wish I could say that translates into fun for me. But it feels like, oh, this is something I could easily spend 30 minutes on every turn. And in fact, when I played the game one time, it was because I had printed out a completed factory from like a BGG thread where I could start to plan things out, because you do kind of like add a sector every time. So you have kind of almost like a clockwise or a counterclockwise build to your factory of like, here's how you can put 3 things together. So like, is that cheating? Like there's definitely a lot of skill that goes into the factory puzzle game.
Yeah.
And ultimately like that did not translate into fun for me. I think it's fascinating, but it was also felt like, oh, this is killing me. And I can really ruin this on turn 1, classic
Yes.
splatter kind of situation to be in. But the market, the demand market is very cool. But then again, like I think for some people, you end up with these kind of plastic squares that define, what you can buy from. And that is in danger of being fiddly. Like it's brilliant.
No, it's very fiddly. But I mean, it's I think it's neat. I like that.
Splatter's not afraid of fiddly.
Yeah.
No.
I think that I think it's a fascinating game. I can definitely see a lot of like emergent depth and strategy and interaction in it. Like it's definitely a game that probably rewards plays, and like it's cool how your player board you build your player board in order to satisfy the demand, but yes, you are trying to influence the demand to then that way service your player board. And I think that interaction is really cool. And we were talking last night that like, one of the reasons why I had this great round was because I went hard on these 2 technologies, and that like maybe with more plays, Jordan and Paul would have recognized that me having that good technology and seeing what was coming next was going to give me an advantage, and so that they would maybe work together to have a different aspect come out for the market instead of the one that came out for me, which benefited me. So like I could definitely see there being, interaction and cool stuff like that. I think the reason why maybe it hasn't connected with more people is I like with Food Chain Magnet. It's very thematic. Like it makes sense. Like you make a corporate structure and then you sell, and like it's like, oh yeah, I made this organization and I'm going to sell food. Oh, but you're selling food too, and you have better marketing, or you're cheaper, or whatever. You sold the food to me. Or like Indonesia also has similar, sort of very clean ideas about supply and demand. But here there is definitely an element of abstraction, which may work against the immersion for a lot of people. So I can imagine that like, it's more like the connecting the dots of like what I'm doing here, how that affects something there. So I can imagine that's also why this Horse's Carriage has not been like as huge of a like people. There have been a lot of people who've been like, oh, it's fine, but I thought it was really fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I think it's a work of art.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I appreciate it more as like, look at these fantastic, interesting things it's doing. Does that actually translate into fun? It asks a lot of you, and it may just be too hard for a lot
really
of players. The questions it's asking are pretty demanding.
I guess what I was trying to say is that like as you build your factory, I can imagine for some people they still may not just be like a clean correlation between like me building my factory in this way is going to like have this impact on the market, or I'm going to be able to capitalize the market by I just don't know if like connecting those dots is as clean as with like Food Chain Magnate. And so therefore,
there's
if
a
you feel
spatial
like you're just sort of
relationship.
doing things in service of something, like if you don't see the connection, it might not be as fun for some people. But I enjoyed it. I feel like people aren't talking about it as much anymore, but it's a super fun game, I thought.
They may be like 1 or 2 plays and done. I think is a lot of people's experience.
I don't think it's going to have that longevity. I mean, I really think it demands a lot of repeat plays to get to the place where you can answer the questions it's asking and interact with your opponents. And I don't know if our group or a lot of groups are going to take it that far, which is kind of a shame. But for those groups who do really get into it, I think there's a lot to enjoy there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really good. What's some other games you played recently, Jordan?
I've played a few games of Voidfall recently.
Uh-huh.
So I thought I'd give a quick update.
Yeah, what's the
on
Voidfall
those.
update?
So I've played a few 2 and 3 player games. I know when last we spoke about it, we were analyzing how much interaction there would be. And I've come to accept that there will be very little interaction.
Okay.
Yeah. It's really just
The aggression quotient on the scenarios doesn't.
it doesn't do quite enough. I find that at the end of the final era of the game, there might be a few battles over territories, and you can try and take 20 or 30 points from an opponent by taking 1 hex or something like that. But we have not reached a point, and I've probably played close to 10 games now, of you're fighting at the end of the first era, for instance. But I find the puzzle of the card play and the puzzle of what technologies to acquire and sort of how to go about expanding your empire to be so enjoyable that I've sort of given up on the aggression requirement, and I'm still enjoying playing the game. And I'd say a lot of enjoyment.
There's a good engine there.
It's a really good engine. It's
Right.
super fun, and every scenario just feels so different with what technologies are on offer and what faction you're playing, that it feels to me like an endless amount to explore with that competitive game. So
And you
still
don't
really
need it. You
enjoying
don't need the aggression.
No, I mean, when I sit down to play Voidfall, I'm going to try and play it at mostly 2 and occasionally 3, and
Because 4 is too slow.
because 4 is too slow, and just enjoy the puzzle of building up my own empire. And, occasionally there'll be a center hex to fight for, and there'll be some combat at the end of it, but it's really going to be more of a multiplayer solitaire, fighting over a market of text, but otherwise doing your own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I think for me, what was just hard was that it was billed as a very Euro-y Twilight Imperium, and I just didn't feel like it was,
I think that's right. I don't think it is like that. I think when you're playing this, it's more akin to playing, although it has even less interaction than something like Anachrony, which is another Mind Clash game where you're building your own sort of area, and there might be a few resources that you're competing over. I mean, Anachrony has more interaction because it's worker placement, but the focus is on your own little board, your own little area. That's a bad comparison point. I'm sure there are others. Caverna, maybe.
I don't know. I think this is a game I would have loved when I was 22.
Okay.
Because I think I still would have wanted the bashy parts at the end, because those are the games I was playing
Sure.
back at that time. And like now, I don't think I enjoy those. I've talked about this. Like I love playing Through the Ages against AI. I don't want to play against humans. Like we're in a game of Agricola right now, and I just put a big block on Matt, and it feels bad.
Sure.
That's not something that I want to do. I get no pleasure from that. Whereas 22-year-old me would have been like, yeah. And it's also been some of my reluctance to get into the 18XX field a little bit is I know the potential for strife in that setup, and I'm not sure I have a taste for it anymore. I think with Voidfall, part of it is I think it was kind of billed as a fast 4X to a certain degree, but the setup is not fast.
The setup is lengthy, but the game is relatively quick. I mean, playing with 2 players, you could get it done in 2 hours probably. For a 4X, that's not bad. I will say, Trey, there are a bunch of low aggression scenarios that you might enjoy where you're just building up your own engine. Those are really good scenarios to play,
But if we're going to play an engine game, let's play an engine game. This just feels like, to me, this is a weird platypus. I would have loved this platypus when I was 22. I'm not sure at 55 that it's the thing I want. I don't know. There's a lot of cool things there. Again, I can understand when people say they love it. I totally respect that.
Yeah.
This is not a game where I think, oh, you're crazy for liking that. I get it. It's just, it's a bad fit for me.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
Same. Although I have told Jordan many times, there was enough meat on the bones there that I did like, that I said I'd be willing to come back to it once the ideal scenario has been determined for me.
That's right.
But then part of me is also thinking am I realistically going to come back to it?
Are you going to be able to pull off the horseless carriage?
Am I really going to? Because I've spent so much time talking about how I've really grown to dislike Voidless Fall, that I'm like, if I'm being honest with myself, do I have an open heart? And I like to think I do, but I worry that I don't. you know.
I think if you wanted to come back, you'd have to sit down with the expectation of we're playing a Euro.
Yeah.
We're not playing a space game.
We're just playing a fun Euro.
And then if
again.
you got into that headspace, you might enjoy it.
Yeah. So another game that we played recently, Jordan and I played Boon Lake Artifacts, the expansion to Boon Lake.
How was that?
It was interesting. I mean, Jordan and I have played 2 games of Boon Lake together, including this one. I've only played with Jordan. Actually, I've only played 2 games.
Okay.
I've only played with Jordan, and it's only 2-player games. So my experience with Boon Lake has only been the 2-player version.
Yeah.
And yeah, Boon Lake is an interesting one to me because I enjoy it. I like when we're playing it. I feel like everything is there for like a game, like for a tremendous game, like for me to just love. And for some reason, I don't love it. There's like an X factor missing. But I'm like, I also feel like I could grow to love it. I don't know. It might be another Voidfall situation where it's like sometimes if that X factor isn't there for you, it's just not there and you can't force it, you know? But the expansion adds some interesting stuff. It speeds the game up, because I think that was a criticism that a lot of people had of it, that the game took too long. Mm-hmm. And so it encourages people to go quickly. You no longer can all sit in harbors on the board at the same time. So you have to move down the board faster. Which
is the timer for the game.
For the game. And then there's also Boon Lake, by the way, is Alexander Pfister. And yeah. So it also introduces like a lake, or is it a lake? It was like a pond.
There's a puddle.
It's a puddle.
I think it was actually the actual Boon Lake, which was not present in the base game.
Yeah, it's an interesting little module where you can walk around counterclockwise or clockwise and take certain steps, and then take the bonus of wherever you get to.
Yeah,
and reset your marker.
Because like certain actions, like if you travel swiftly down the river, you get free action. You get to walk along the lake.
Well, that was randomly determined, right? What lets you move along the lake?
Was that random?
Yeah, there's 8 tiles.
No. There were tiles that when you did those things would give you movement around the lake, but also inherently, if anytime you move swiftly, you get these bonuses. And then it was actually really helpful because when you take the bonuses from this new sideboard, those bonuses help a lot. And then it also introduces the artifacts, which are, how did we get those artifacts again? We had to sacrifice a boat.
Yeah, you sacrifice one of your resource generating boats.
Yeah.
To put out like a little house on the map, and you get one of, I think, the player's +1 artifacts that are set up at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
These are like player powers, kind of.
Exactly. And the player, it gives you sort of a little bit of an async quality, the player powers. And they are powered by putting the vases. Vases are a resource that felt a little underused in the base game. And so now there's like another use for vases with the artifacts. And that was fun. I mean, I had a fun time playing. It's like once it's over, it's like you just don't even remember it, you know?
Yeah.
It's a recommendation.
I feel like if you're going to play a Pfister game, this would be the one I recommend last. That I've played, but
yeah, probably
it was still fun to sit down and play it. I just wouldn't want to explore it that much, right?
Yeah.
I want to play Sky Mines. I want to play more Great Western Trail.
I just don't understand why Boon Lake does not pop for me. Like everything, I like the tableau building. The card play is fun. I always enjoy. I think the board placement where you put this down and then people can capitalize off of what pieces you put on the board. I always find that stuff to be fun, and I just don't know why it doesn't like pop. I wonder if the stuff on the board is almost too simplistic. If there were more interesting synergies that came for like every time you put this building down, you can put a cow, like your cows do something.
Kind of a signature thing in this is the action selection.
Right. Which is also the action selection, I think, is good.
It's interesting. It's different. I'm not sure I loved it. Mm-hmm. Like it's a thing that's there. I didn't fall in love with it. I think
at higher player counts, it feels a little random because you want to be moving your boat further,
Mm-hmm.
your boat 4. And if 3 people go, and it so happens that after there are 3 turns, the action that you want to take is not in the top 2, or is even at the bottom where you'll lose 2 points if you take it.
Right.
Bad luck.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's not great. Where the game's kind of creating almost like random obstacles for you from you doing what you want to do. I think the game, like I've not played the expansion. I struggled to kind of, again, this is me like wanting the game to kind of like make sense or to approximate something. I didn't think it really did that in a way that, Great Western Trail tells a couple of stories of like driving cattle to the market and that map, that loop that we do. Like Pfister's famous for his loops. Here, the map is essentially like it's not a loop, but there's 3 different stages of progression, kind of like when you go through the gates a little bit. But you've got that loop and you're delivering and you've got trains. Like that made a certain amount of sense of like, hey, it's a cattle game in which we're like building out the West and doing a cattle industry. And even Maracaibo, which frustrated me because you had so little control over when the turns would end, because like someone could cause all of your plans to go awry because they raced to the end on a given turn. That at least was like, hey, here's a map of the Caribbean, and you're kind of like building out your infrastructure and progressing through it. And that was an interesting narrative of what it was doing. And the Boone Lake one felt like, we're doing boats down a river.
Yeah.
What are we
Sci-fi
doing there?
theme, yeah.
I don't know.
It's not the American West. It's not the Australian West. It's kind of like, because I think they want to dodge those historical questions,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
It's Westy.
I wonder if maybe this is a case where like the X Factor, I think the X Factor probably comes from the board, because the card play is fun. The card play is very reminiscent of Maracaibo. I love Maracaibo, and I love the card play in that. I love everything. I'm not annoyed that the loop gets cut off early. It's annoying when it happens, but I'm not annoyed at the game. I'm usually annoyed at the player
what
who
you're
does
getting
that to
into
me.
with that. Yeah.
But I think like, I wonder if maybe the stuff that you put out on the board on Boone Lake, like it might have a little bit of the FIAM effect, where it's like pieces that go out there in order to get victory points, as opposed to like when you put the pieces down, they don't like necessarily create an engine for you. Do they create an engine for you, Jordan? I'm trying to remember.
They do create, some of them create monetary income and some of them create point income.
But the actual like board position doesn't matter tremendously. That's your kind of FAM question,
it's
right?
only for the cows.
For the cows
have to be adjacent to certain settlements.
But say like we just compare this to Nucleum for a second, where people complaining it's 2 heads down. The actual map's incredibly interactive. Like where your network is and how you can be blocked and how you connect to power stations is deeply meaningful for everyone involved. And I think Boone Lake's on the other side of that spectrum, where the map
you care where people are, because there's certain things like you have to, if you want to grow a settlement into like a larger piece of wood, you have to be around 3 whatever the next whatever the
I
next
rest
level
my
up is.
case.
Like it's like a town, like it's
You have to be around certain pieces.
You have to be around certain pieces in order for that to happen.
There's also an income thing where when you do income, 3 of the 4 regions will score income, and if all your pieces are in the one region that's not scoring income, that's bad. But generally speaking, you're right, Trey. The map is not as important.
It's not as dynamic and exciting as other map games are. Also, I have this thing just in general with games that have incomes, which is like, if you're going to give me income opportunities, I want several of them. And that's not just Boone Lake. Underwater City is one of my favorites of all time. You only get to do income, 2 or 3 times? If you're going to give me income, give me like...
You want that loop.
I want that loop. That's why I think actually one of the reasons why Terraforming Mars is so successful is that you get to run your engine many times, like 12, 13, 14 times. And I think that is a deeply satisfying thing, that you work on something and you get to reap the rewards many, many, many times, rather than just like at the end of the quarter.
Yeah. And how many generations you play in that game is somewhat player decision, right? Of like, people can speed things up, people can slow things down, and it's thoughtful in the generations of the game.
Yeah, and so in the Terraforming Mars, the latest Kickstarter that they had, that one of the maps that they put out is, I forget what it's called, but it's like an epic map that may have even started out as a fan map, and I think it moves all the requirements. It takes more work for all the requirements, because the thing is, they say you can basically play in God mode. That's what they call it, because you have now, your engines are out of control good. And usually that's around when, Terraforming Mars stops. Most engine games, the moment you get in, like you have this beautiful engine, you don't really get to live with that beautiful engine for very long. So it looks like this new map lets you just live in that space for a long time, which I think speaks to the fact that people enjoy that. They enjoy being able to just give me all the power,
Yeah, the ramp up is a question. Different games have different ramp ups, and yeah, Nucleum is a great example of it feels like that it's so tight at the beginning, but then it by the end of the game, it's like I got tons of workers, I got tons of money, I can do anything. Like,
Yeah.
it would never have envisioned that after the first round. I'm like, oh, how do I get one more coin? You know, sometimes I don't know. The ramp up is a thing. You know, like
It's fun.
I feel like some games that do the ramp up really well, like I love Agricola.
Yeah.
Like that's an interesting ramp up. You know, the way that
Yeah, but you just never think you could. I think actually a fascinating ramp up where you just think you will never make any money ever or any income at Arkwright. Arkwright, you are like, you're just losing money. You're like, well, how can I ever turn the corner on this game? And then somehow by hour 4, you are finally making like $100 on
right.
something.
Couldn't Aura 2 has quite the ramp up.
Oh yes, that's true.
I don't know.
Actually, it has a big ramp up,
It's a big ramp up.
which we'll get to in a moment.
Yeah.
Trey, do you have any other games you wanted to talk about?
not really. We I think we're playing some more Agricola.
Yeah.
You know, we're back to the classic. I think Matt wants to get Jordan to start playing more seriously because he would like a core group of people that like want to play.
I would like to play it more seriously. We played one game this week on Tuesday. We're playing a game on BGA right now, and I've really enjoyed both games. I love the draft mechanic. It's such a great game, just one I've never explored deeply. So I'm hoping that we stick with it.
Yeah, there's a reason why it's Matt and my favorite game, and so I think he's like, I think we can convert Jordan.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
You know, so that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But we're like even Agricola, like yeah, there can still be salt.
Yeah.
You know, which I'm
After
fine.
all this time, you're still having
Well, it doesn't
emotional
take
moments.
much for me to have an emotional moment. I wish I were more.
But like it's a
mature.
worker placement game. I mean, right? Like no one's owed any space, right?
I'm a party to this suit, so I don't feel like I can speak.
I would say maybe there's a difference between, oh, we both want this space, and oh, you need this space, so I will take it to hurt you.
Oh yeah.
Which I think both are valid moves in Agricola, but they feel a little different.
Yeah.
Not that I'm the expert.
Especially, I guess, if you're playing at a high level.
Yeah.
Which we're not necessarily doing at all.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not.
Jordan, what about you? I mean, I'm seeing some of these games that you played. I feel like there's lots of interesting stuff for you to talk about here. Give us another game that you want to tell the people about.
It's difficult. I've played yesterday. Friend of the podcast, Jason, and I played 2 games that for me were lost to history for a while. There were Trismegistus and Anno 1800. We played them both 2-player, and they're very interesting games. I know Trey has some thoughts about Trismegistus as well, but Trismegistus is like one of the T games from. Well, it's from Tashini, I think, and it is perhaps the most maligned of them.
It has become I've never played it. I don't even know. I don't even know what it looks like. But just from listening and being a part of this podcast and this group, it has become like the poster child of like a terrible game.
But you know what?
No, not terrible game, but Baroque design.
Okay.
I think it's become shorthand, and I may be to blame here. And again, like it's,
Literally, we'll go to a restaurant and try to be like, I don't know what I want to get. This is like Trismegistus.
and people know what I'm talking about. So it's an effective summary of things. But yeah, I mean, I think I've already articulated how I like my games to have some thematic sense. So when you're in the realm of the alchemist who is converting, I don't know, what is it like? Gold diamonds into purple stones. Like I've already forgotten exactly, but you're it's alchemy. You're converting one resource to another, and you're filling out a grid. And
So I will say, I found that part of the game actually to be somewhat thematic in that alchemy is kind of like, BS conversion of resources. That's what alchemy is.
exactly what it is.
And that's exactly what the game is. So it emulates that well. Whether you want to partake in that is an entirely different question altogether. But I found the game very, very taxing, very hard to play. You
Really?
have to plan really
In a good
far
way,
ahead.
in a-
I was finding some of the decisions fairly interesting. I mean, the dice that you're taking matter in 5 or 6 different ways.
it's combo-tastic.
It's combo-tastic. It's really
if you're
heavy.
not stringing these things together into this creates this, which creates this, which creates this, like
Right.
then you're not doing it right.
Right. And
know-
you got to be like working towards these endgame scoring cards that you have to meet certain requirements to even score. And they're very difficult to meet. Like I drew maybe 6 of those over the course of the game, and I was able to score 2. They're really, really hard to to accomplish. So that felt rewarding. It was a pretty fun play. It's not my favorite game. It's not one that I want to return to repeatedly, but I was pleasantly surprised. Jason had been wanting to play it for a while, so we brought it to the table, and I was pleasantly surprised.
You're just like a charitable gamer this weekend. Well, servicing.
Well, you're
enjoy it.
young
I
and
enjoy
you're
it.
young and open-minded.
Yeah, I suppose. And then I wanted to play Anno 1800. That was the one I wanted to bring to the table. So
All right.
I guess it was a trade. And
I
that
take it all
game
back.
was less enjoyable than Tristan Justice, I think, for both of us, which is, I think, probably fairly
Interesting.
surprising.
Wow.
But it felt very repetitive because the whole game you're just building new industries and playing new cards. And it's kind of a race, but there's no arc to the game. It's just, okay, I'm building another resource. This time it's blue. In an hour, it will be purple, but who cares? Like, you know, you're just building more little tiles and then playing more cards. And every resource feels exactly the same in that it is a requirement for some other resource. But, you know, when you get there's some thematic tie-in, like, oh, you need a machine gun to build a level 3 combat boat or whatever. But, you know, at the end of the day, the machine gun is just a tile on your board with a picture of a machine gun on it.
Machine gun or cannons, probably.
Cannon's the level 2 ship. It's not, maybe it's not a machine gun, but it's an elevated cannon,
Okay.
a metal cannon.
I like Anno. I've got a few quibbles
Sure.
with it. I'm wondering whether it's a game that's not going to work at 2, because some of the most interesting questions about that game are at like the 4-player count, because multiple people can buy the same techs, which is actually something where if 2 people buy the same techs, it's actually kind of bad for both of them, which is a dynamic that we're probably going to revisit here in Cut Nahora, where, you know, you have these weird alliances of, hey, when you double up on the thing I built, it actually kind of hurts both of us, because it can be an income stream when you're providing the tech for another person to build off of. There's an interesting tech growth thing that may not be fully realized until you get to a 3 or 4 player count game. It might feel more zero sum at 2.
Yeah,
because you're often making a decision of like, once you've got that split of like, oh, well, this guy can make, you know, tanned hides and someone else can make tanned hides. I'm making that up. That may not even be a thing in the game, but like I can spend a coin to one of them so I can use it to do my thing. Well, I don't want Tom to get this. So Ben, here's a coin.
Right.
Like there was some of that. But for other times, like you're the only person that has tan hides. I don't know. There was some interesting stuff that came out of just the tech tree. I think that's an amazing tech tree in that game. And it sounded like it did not feel that interesting. It felt repetitive in marching through it. Whereas in the 4-player, the multiple routes might create opportunities for.
I remember now that
interesting
you
play.
say this, because I think I said last week that I like Anno, but I didn't love it as much as everyone else in the group.
Yeah.
But I do remember that my first play was 2-player, and then the subsequent plays were 3 or 4 players, and 2-player was 100% the weakest. Like, I don't know. I seem to remember thinking at the time that it shouldn't even have a 2-player option, because everyone can just get all the tiles, right? Like whatever tile you need, you can just get a 2-player, right?
Well, that's right. There's no scarcity.
There's no scarcity.
There
and
are 2 of each tile, but at the same time, it's still a race, so you can't get every tile.
True, you can't. But at least with the
You never get
3 or
boxed
4
out.
player, there was like a scarcity element that I responded to more. But I also was not playing at the level you're describing of like, you know, that deep level.
Well,
but
like,
either way,
I think our group tends to gravitate towards stuff that creates interesting social interactions.
yeah,
In plays, and that felt like one of them.
yeah. You know, speaking of interesting social interactions, a game that I would like to talk about. Unless is there something you were about to say about Anno?
No, go for it.
But a game I want to talk about is one of the last games that I have to discuss is Wildcatters, which came out many years ago, sort of released by Capstone. If I were a better podcaster, I would have the years and designers, and I would have maybe chimed in with any information on any of the games we've been talking about.
keep vamping.
But anyway, Wildcatters is
Wolf Sagel and Andre Spill.
right, who did Coffee Traders. Same designers as Coffee Traders.
Gotcha.
This is a game that I was initially drawn to after watching Rado's run through of it, because I was fascinated by the idea of like everyone at the table is playing a part in the logistical nightmare, or not really a nightmare, but just like a logistical
You're wildcatting.
supply chain of
Oil.
oil.
Yep.
And basically in the game, we're all oil, maybe companies. We're all oil companies.
And
we're,
wildcatters.
well, we're actually not wildcatters.
No, you're not. Okay.
You
It's
can
sort
get
of-
Wildcatter tokens.
Yeah, it's sort of funny that it's called wildcatters, but we're not wildcatters. What you do is you go to different continents and you dig for oil and everything, and then as you become successful, you can actually just buy out the wildcatters, just like the independent.
You gobble it. You drink their milkshake.
Yeah, you drink their milkshake, and so it's. But what's interesting about the game is, like Coffee Traders, there's a lot of if you do this action, then we can all follow. And like following is like it feels unfair that they all follow for free, but you have to pay something to do it. But then when they all follow, you get certain benefits, and you turn that benefit into this, into that. You build your oil rigs, you build your pump jacks, you build trains to transport your barrels of oil, you build refineries to refine the oil, you build boats to move
So you
the
played
oil
this
all
finally
around.
this week, or you played it before?
I have played it before, but recently I played it with Paul and our friend Stacy and her boyfriend John, and had not played it in forever.
Right.
And we had a tremendous time. It's such a strange game. It has a weird tempo. It has a little bit of the thing that I was talking about with Horseless Carriage, which is that you're sort of doing stuff, but sometimes it's not always clear why. And it's actually even more prevalent in Wildcatters because it's like, oh, cool, I built an oil rig. Oh, I'm moving my oil around to a different. I'm taking it to an oil refinery. I'm getting some shares by doing that. But you're like, but why? Why am I doing this? And I always describe the game as like an elaborate game of Plinko, because you send your oil, through all these things. It comes from here, it goes on a ship, goes on a train, and it goes to someone's refinery. And then ultimately your little barrel of oil winds up in a section of the board that's like, hey, you provided oil for Africa. You provided oil for Europe. And at the end of the
Is
game,
that the market? Yeah. So
those are the markets. And like at the end of the game, whoever provided the most for this market gets 6 points. Second place gets 4
there's an
points.
area control.
It's just like like an area majority at the end of the game, but you just have to go through this elaborate process. But what I really enjoyed about it was as we went through the game, as we go round by round, it becomes clearer and clearer to us how all these cogs work together. And what had once seemed very opaque suddenly becomes fascinating, and you realize how you can pull the different levers and stuff.
This sounds like my jam. This is modeling a real thing.
It's action. I love that part of it. But what was really cool is that by the end, we're all like making discussions like, why don't you take the oil to my refinery? Because if you take it to John's, then he has to, like, he's going to do well on this market. It's like, oh, but then this person, I think I can force them to take a loan by taking the stuff to their market. So
that sounds like a really interesting space to be in, right?
Yeah, but but you do spend the first few rounds saying like, you don't get the tingles. You're sort of just been like, I just feel like I'm doing stuff.
I wonder if that would happen though if you played again soon. Right?
Exactly.
With this past experience.
I think it would not, because when I initially got the game, I remember the first time I played it, same experience, and then I played it very quickly after, and it was much more fun out the gate.
Right.
But this was still by far the best of all the experiences I've had, because ultimately, the reason why I brought this up on the heels of what we were just talking about was that it created a lot of tabletop conversation. It created a lot of like back and forth negotiating and discussion. And it was like when you get forced into taking loans in this game, and you just everyone sort of like laughed, because if you have to pay, there's certain things that happen where you're forced to pay other players, and if you can't pay them, you have to take a loan. So people will intentionally do things. If they deliver oil to your refinery,
you have to buy it, right?
Yeah, you have to buy it, so you have to pay it. And then if you can't pay them, you have to take a loan, and the loan is prohibitive. But then I was like, you know what? I've got loans. I'm going to play with it. It just was really fun. It was a really fun experience to have this game that I was like, I haven't played this game in a while. Like, do I even still like this game? And then have like a really delicious social experience out of it.
Coffee Traders has gotten better with plays for me too. I think Wildcatters is on my list of like, I've always wanted to play it, and I've always heard like good things. There's always like good things, but it's
it's an imperfect game. It's a little wonky. It feels like it could be tighter, or it feels like, I mean, you've played it, Jordan.
It's been a while, but I have played it.
You own it.
I do own it. I like it. I think I prefer Coffee Traders, but I've played Coffee Traders a lot more recently. So It's hard to say.
Paul seemed to really enjoy it. In fact, when we were at your house, Paul said he was like, "I would love to play Wildcatters again."
That's true.
So it really seemed to connect with him.
Yeah, I would happily
cool.
try it again. I think it's an interesting design for sure.
It is, at the very least, it's an interesting design.
Yeah.
I just love, honestly, I love games, and this could be a segue unless anyone has other games to talk about. But like, I do really enjoy games where everyone plays a different part in an economy of the game.
A larger system.
Of a larger.
Yeah.
That's why I really love like hegemony, etc. Like
Right.
I love when we all are like a part of a ecosystem.
I'm going to interrupt the segue though.
Oh, please do.
For two quick bits of news.
I'm a big segue interrupter myself. So
okay. I won't
please-
feel bad then.
No, don't. Never.
First, I just wanted to, I don't know if you guys mentioned this last week, but BGA has this Games of Winter event going on right now, Board Game Arena, where every day they're releasing a new game for all of December. And so
In
far,
beta, or is it released, or is it?
I don't think it's in beta. I think they're just
It's just like
released.
surprise, like
I think they're
surprise. We've been working on this.
Yeah. And so far, included among the releases have been Hanama Koji and Yokai Septet, both of which are great games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sea Salt and Paper was also recently added. I'm not sure if that was part of the same event.
Sea salt and paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a restaurant. Doesn't it sound like something that would be in LA? Like
Sounds
Salt and
delicious.
Pepper.
It's like a hot new card game.
It sounds like it's in the arts district of LA.
Yeah, I can see that. So those
Dimitri's
are
already been there.
It was very good, but I didn't understand what the menu was about.
now. Whoa, where did Ben just go?
Dimitri has been here the whole time, just waiting to talk about a restaurant.
Yeah.
He did that.
So anyways, I think that's worth checking out. And the second thing is Matt, in his recent solo mode episode, talked about Earthborn Rangers. I've been streaming that with my friend Brandon on his YouTube channel, Optimal Play. I think we're up through day 6. So if you want to see that game played, you can check out our streams
On
on YouTube.
On YouTube.
Optimal Play, yeah.
Optimal Play.
That's the name of the channel. So if
Okay,
you
Optimal
type in
Play on YouTube.
Optimal Play, Earthborn.
Check the show notes for a link.
Check the show notes.
Yeah, my friend Brandon and my friend Drew and I have been playing through it. It's been really fun. So
Great.
worth checking out.
So you're recording this and playing it back, or can people watch live?
So most of the sessions we've recorded you can watch live, and then they're later posted to be watched.
Sure.
Occasionally we've not streamed and we've just recorded the video and then posted it, but usually we stream on Wednesdays. So I think this Wednesday probably
Okay.
we'll stream day 7 or day 8, wherever we are.
And recommend? You're really
I'm not going to recommend our stream.
No, the
that might be
game.
boring, but the game I really enjoy. It's an interesting take.
stream. It's crap.
Stream.
I mean, we put out terrible
The stream
content.
is good. I
Absolute
just don't want to say, you really, if you're not interested, it's maybe not worth watching, but it is really fun. I think we have a good time.
We
doing
found
it.
somebody who's worse at promoting
I'm
their own
sorry, yeah,
podcast
I'm really
than
bad.
me.
No, it's
If
great.
you wanna
Brett,
see some terrible playthroughs.
No.
On Wednesday.
The channel's great. We do a lot of really fun playthroughs.
If you have low
of
standards.
card games. So there's Arkham Horror. There's this. We're going to do Sorcery, Lawyer Up. A bunch of different card games are streamed on Optimal Play, and they're all great streams. Brandon's does a great job putting it all together. The game is really fun. It's like a looser Arkham Horror that's more of an open world and focused on exploration. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. I'll just say I've really enjoyed it, and if you want to see it played, Optimal Play is a great place to do it.
We'll check it out. Well, I mean, I know we have actually a ton more games that we have played, but we probably should move on to Kutnahora.
Sure.
So, Kutnahora, it's a game we've talked about it over the past few episodes.
We teased it.
Teased it. We've sort of shown a little bit of its cleave. But it's a new game from Czech Games Edition. Designers are, oh my goodness, this is a combination of words that are difficult for me to say, and also my eyes going. Okay, Andrzej Bystron, Petra Koslava, Pavel Jarosz are the designers. Artists, I'm just doing this really to test this. Can I really say these names? And I apologize, by the way, to the people who worked on this game. Stepan Jarostok, David Jablonovsky, Jacob Jablonovsky, Jacob Pulitzer, and Milan Vavron.
Yeah, this is the big new Czech Games.
Yeah,
game.
Trey, do you want to tell us
They
what it's
were
about?
definitely promoting it heavily at BGG Con. Very excited about it. Okay, so concept is this is based on an actual historical city in Czech Republic now.
Czechia.
Okay.
Is what's going on.
I'm still a child of the Cold War, so I always want to say Czechoslovakia, but it's not. But this is, so it's Kutna-Hora, the city of silver. And this is kind of a city builder in which we are both growing the city of Kutna-Hora as we expand out its mines. And its mines produce both ore, silver and coal, or
I think
silver.
the mines just produce ore.
I think it's ore and coal.
But when we say ore,
ore and silver.
It gets turned into silver, fine silver. Because I think this was like
it
the
could be
silver.
refined. Okay.
I think in real life this was like a silver capital.
Okay, so you get the
of
ore
region.
and then you smelt it. Okay.
If you've ever been to Prague, there's like a lot of silver there. They sell a lot of silver.
I saw some stat that said Kutna-Hora produced 30% of Europe's silver at one point.
Wow.
But it's a city builder, and Ben, you love
I love
a city builder. And so we are all kind of like representing muckety muck factions that are building the city and
Make 'em up factions.
Muckety muck.
muckety muck make 'em up factions. And there are 6 guilds in the game, and these 6 guilds actually represent like the 6 kind of buildings that you can build in the game. And you, muckety muck Ben, I'm
a resident of this city who's gathering political
Sir
power.
Muckety Muck.
I'm not a muckety muck faction. I'm someone who's trying to
Muckety
get
mucks are important.
prestige and
But of these 6 guilds, Ben, your muckety muck has access to 3 kinds. So there's only 3 kinds of buildings that you can build, and everybody has a combination of 3.
I'm in 3 guilds, and
You're in 3
because
guilds.
I'm in 3 guilds, I am now entitled to build buildings
Of
for
that type.
fellow members of my guild.
That's right. And so everyone has kind of asymmetrical access to the types of buildings in this game. And over the course of the game, we are both expanding out into the mines and kind of getting increased mining income. And also we're going to score those mines at the end, but we're also building the city. We have a kind of a competitive city builder in the center in which as we build the buildings, we are kind of like serving the needs of the town.
Yeah.
Perhaps we are making beer for the town. Perhaps we are making food for the town. Perhaps we are generating wood for the town or documents or whatever.
Well, because it's like because it's also very economic, because it's not just like, oh, we're going into mines and we're building a town. It's like the idea is that this is a real place that prospered because of its mining. And so as we mine,
it's a collective effort.
It's a collective effort. We're creating wealth that can then be turned into business in the town. And then some of us are in control of different businesses and we build those businesses out. Those businesses bring more population into the town, which affect, what people want and how much you can charge for things. And then you go and you dig some more in the mines and you bring more wealth and yada, yada. So there's like, it's a city builder, but there's also an element of like an evolving ecosystem in the city.
That's right. And so to win, you were the person who kind of like contributed most to the growth of the city.
Yeah.
And possibly what's the most fascinating thing about this is the kind of market that you were talking about. There's like, as we build buildings, we are affecting this expanding market because they're tracking both on a generic level. They're tracking like how developed is the mine and like what is the population of the town. Mm-hmm. So as the population of the town grows, its demand for goods goes up. When you supply those goods, you're going to make a lot of money from that, but also you've increased the supply. So the value of those goods goes down. And the way that they track this in the game, I think, is really innovative and interesting, which is kind of this card system with sliders on it that can kind of track the town's contribution to certain goods as the city is growing. And in a sense, it's kind of like an expanded spreadsheet, but it's done in a very clever, trackable way through a card system.
Yeah. It's almost like if you had a spreadsheet and if like on every row, the spreadsheet said, okay, this is what this row says, the demand for wood, or the wood will sell for $5 and silver will sell for $6 and beer will sell for $3, whatever. Let's say like that's what the spreadsheet says. And then, oh no, more people came into the town. So we go to a new sheet on the spreadsheet that has, okay, let's revise that and change those numbers. So when you say there's a card system, we literally take a card out of a holder and put it to the back. Yeah. And now we have revised numbers that reflect the prices for all these goods that we're using.
And that range might be from like the population starts at 1 and could go all the way up to like 40.
40, yeah.
It's 40 something,
Yeah. So that's like a big thing is like you are building the city. Theoretically, you're also building a cathedral because why not?
Was it St. Augustus or something?
No, Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara, sorry.
Barbara, yeah.
Santa Barbara. So you're basically, as you build the city out, you are affecting this market, and that's like I think the big shtick of the game. I mean, there's other stuff, and it's all done, by the way, with card-driven. You want to talk, Jordan? You want to talk about the card action selection?
Sure.
In the game?
So you have a hand of 6 cards, and each card has 2 actions on it, and you're going to play 5 of them over a course of the round. I think you have 2 actions that will allow you to build a new section of the mine, 2 that will allow you to plot a new location in the town that you're going to build in, 2 that will let you sort of reserve a building plan to build in the future, 2 that will let you build, and 2 that will let you get income, which we'll talk about in a second, and then 1 that will let you contribute to Santa Barbara, and 1 that's a wild.
The cathedral that's being built in the center of town.
Right, exactly. And so, but all these cards are, all these pairs of actions are on cards, and if you play a card for one action, you can't use it for the other. So you'll sort of play through five cards over the course of a round, and you'll play 5 rounds.
That's right. You said it really quick there. So like each of these action cards has 2 actions on it, where if you invert the card, flip it upside down, like every time you play a card, you are choosing which way you're going to use it. Right. So whenever you play a card, you're actually eliminating another choice at the same time, which makes for an interesting and often difficult set of sequencing in your hand.
Right. And while you do have a wild action, there is a cost to using it.
Hurts your reputation.
Hurts your reputation.
Right.
That's right.
And then we also have our own player boards, which are, everything is sort of like intertwined. Like, you know, the player boards reflect what guilds you're in, but the guilds where when you set up your player board, the guilds will then establish, as you develop that guild, will establish what sort of bonuses that you get over the course of the game. And then you also have a reputation track where, you know, as your reputation goes up, you get certain perks, but then you can also spend reputation to do things in the game. And it's all about kind of like balancing all these elements. That's sort of like a nice, I think, overview without getting too granular about how the game works. Essentially, a city builder with like an economic market with some card play.
One thing I want to maybe highlight, because I think it can get overlooked, is the kind of brilliant thing they do is that despite this game having the resources of wood, food, beer, all of these different things, you never actually have these pieces. You never actually track them. It all comes down to money, which I think is actually quite elegant. You know, if you have built a tavern, you're making beer for the city, which you will sell essentially when you take your income, and that's going to convert to cash. So you can always kind of like do what you want to do as long as you have the money, which I think is a great way of eliminating the kind of token mania that has overtaken many games. My beloved Agricola, for example, you know, like, you know, you're token, and you're tracking what people have in their inventory. There's no inventory here. You just have money. That's incredibly elegant.
And I think that also, that sort of is a good segue into just the presentation of the game and how it looks, is that it is actually in some ways very streamlined, because you don't have little resources for, there's a ton of resources in this game, but you don't have a little bits for them. Everything is a straight conversion. You know, if you want to spend wood, if wood costs $3 a pop and you need to spend 3 wood to build a building, you're spending $9.
Right. And by distilling player holdings into only money, it ties the players more closely to the market. Because if the value of wood fluctuates, you don't have wood. You need to buy it. And if the value of wood goes from 2 to 3 and you're building an 8 wood building, that's $8 more you need to have. It's massive.
Yeah. So you were affording it at 16. You're no longer affording it at 24.
Exactly.
That's a really excellent point. It really does put the market even more central to it. You're really constantly thinking about the market and the things you need to buy and how much it really costs. Because you just you never have it.
Right. And on the income front too, when you produce, you're just getting money. And if you're producing beer and beer is valued at 7 and you produce 5 beer, that's going to be a lot different than if beer was valued at 3. Right.
I think visually, this game, before we get into all the stuff that we like and dislike about it, etc., I think visually, I find that the game has a very clean appearance. I think the iconography is pretty good, and I appreciate that the player aids cover all the iconography. I think actually the player aids are really good. Like, everything you need is on them. I wish we had more player aids that were like that, where it's just like, this is what every single icon is. But luckily there's not so many icons that you need like a menu, like in some games. So I appreciated the way the player aids look. What did you guys think visually about the game, Jordan?
I like the game visually. I think the tiles have a really interesting aesthetic where they have on the front, all the information you need to build the tile and all of the effects of building the tile. But once you're done resolving that, you flip it over and it's a very clean picture of the tile. All it has on it is a picture of the building, a little icon that tells you which guild it came from, and the
Very little.
very
Like,
little.
that would be where my criticism
Very
is
little.
actually
It's
like
too
once
small.
you flip the tile, I have sometimes saying like, okay, how many beer producing buildings are there out there? And it's not, and it's like, so I'm looking for a specific sigil then that doesn't even really say, it's not even like yellow, or is it yellow for beer or whatever? I think I agree with your basic assessment. Like, this may not be the most beautiful game, but for the most part, it's very clean,
Very
in,
clean
in what
visually.
it, in what it does. And so I think I have a tiny quibble about once you've flipped the tile, I'm sometimes struggling to interpret the board in its completed state, but that's like my only.
It doesn't get in its way, I think, overall.
Right. I really like how it looks. And you can always find that information, how many, breweries are there on the market tracking
That's right.
deck card. It keeps track of that.
Right, which on your first play you may not understand, but you can always say like, wait, how many beer producing? Well, the little slider's been moved twice, so we know there's been 2 beer buildings that have been built. So you know,
Right.
My only quibble visually is it's like an ongoing quibble I have with most city builders, which is that I like my city builders just to look like actual towns when we build them. So like there are nice pictures of these buildings once you build them, but they just are like floating in like a silver background.
Yeah.
Right,
And,
right,
like,
right.
I would like it to put some roads, make it look like you're actually building a town.
You want it to kind of,
I like a visual expression of the I want it would have even been great if when you look at it, you can sort of see how the town is developing, and you can create sort of stories about it a little bit more. And it's not a drawback. I would never say don't buy the game because it's like not an immersive visual representation of a city. But I do think you can only be helped. No, I won't say that. I won't say you can only be helped with more immersive design because you could get too busy but I think that this game, it just would have been lovely. It would have been so lovely if you really could see the town developing as you build it, because it really
and it
is
looked
immersive.
more like a town at the end.
It's very immersive in so many other ways.
That's fair.
If I think what you're kind of looking for is almost like the Carcassonne effect, where
The tiles all match.
where like maybe the building occupied a little bit less space, but it creates a landscape and how they link together at the end. The orientation of the buildings does not matter in this game, so it doesn't have that, which like Carcassonne does, but the way that those are built so that they always fit together is very visually pleasing.
And there's like fun stuff that is like harkens to the Red Cathedral. As you build that cathedral, you flip over the tiles of the cathedral when it's complete, and then when the entire cathedral is done, it's in full color. It comes out of scaffolding, and there's people around it and stuff like that. I always
looks pretty.
enjoy.
Yeah,
it's pretty. But I think visually, like, I'm just happy this game. I think the game as a whole is extremely clean, and that extends visually. Like, it just does not get in its own way. You can just like kind of just access the game. I actually one minor quibble, and I don't know, maybe this may be a quibble, maybe it's not a quibble. On the market, as the market evolves, you never know if the price of something is about to fluctuate. So as population goes up, and when I made the analogy of like you putting on a new sheet of like the spreadsheet, but as we take a card, we don't know, like, does this mean
Are we at a break point?
are we at a break point? So like, oh, the cost of wood is 2 right now. If I bring the population in, is this going to cause the price of wood to go up to 3, or is it not? Because that may impact what I'm going to do, and you have no idea. And they give you a visual cue once you've moved the cards. They put a little like asterisk, a dot to say, hey, this value just changed.
Yeah.
But they don't indicate that something could go up. And there are times where I'm like, gosh, I really would like to know. But I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is it good because like
When we
should be
played, I just
surprised.
looked.
Yeah, you just looked.
I just looked.
But
So
like,
I do think the rules say not to. I'm not sure about that. I'm not saying that you did anything wrong.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no,
saying
but-
that that's not the intention.
but with
of the
multiple
design.
plays, you would essentially know it.
it'd be a lot to memorize
Yeah, but
because you have to
I
memorize
don't like
all 4 columns.
I don't
right?
think it should be a secret.
that's fair.
I guess the question is it trying to simulate the fact that like you don't really ever know an economy and things change?
So to be clear, you know that taking a certain action will increase population or whatever, and that will result in the prices going up.
but not always.
They won't always go up, but it's not as though they might fluctuate and randomly go down.
No,
You know
but
that
like-
either it will stay
will
the same
follow a
or it will
logical
increase
progression.
by 1.
But there are some
right.
times where you're like, I need to know if this price is going to go up.
Totally.
Or I want this price to go up. So therefore I'm going to do this action. Then you do the action, it doesn't go up. And you're like, oh.
What? I just added 3 population. How did the
Yeah.
price of beer
How
not
did-
go up?
Right. Like I'm trying to I'm trying to raise prices so I can do something big. So what I can't tell is it a negative that there's no visual indicator for that thing, or is that actually by design? Like we're supposed to have some sort of like haze over like it's the economy. You can predict it, but you can't ever know it.
So I think there are some shorthand cues that you can know. I think, for instance, whenever you build a building, the price of that good will go down.
Yes.
So really the only mystery is when will prices go up due to population?
Right.
And also, some of the breakpoints are not necessarily the smoothest. Like I've seen sometimes things can, like I think beer sometimes jumps from 3 to 5 or 6.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
it doesn't go 3, 4, 5. There can be kind of weird breakpoints.
Yeah.
That way too. That is sometimes surprising. That
Yeah.
said, I think this is so cool. It encapsulates supply and demand. It rewards you for doing the thing that the city wants you to do.
And by the way, this market, because this does tie into presentation, this market is like a 3D market. They're like little stands, and they're visual, they're tall, and
they're holding a deck of cards.
They command your attention, and they hold a deck of cards, and it works really well. I mean, sometimes moving the slider over, it's hard to describe on a podcast what we mean by a slider, but just know there's like a little window on each row, and wherever the window is where the price is. But
in a new thing, it can be really stiff to move. And I've heard complaints. Like I know Jennifer, I think, really struggled with this and just wanted it to be a spreadsheet.
Because the thing is, it could have been something that was laid out flat on a board, and you have a whole thing, and maybe the whole thing moves. I guarantee that if things would have gotten jostled, things would have.
Right.
It takes up a lot of
This
space.
tracks it very
This
easily.
is just very clean and simple.
Yeah.
You know. So
I'm a fan.
yeah. Let's talk about this. So I mean, we were already talking about stuff we like, but like Jordan, what are some things that you like about this game? What's working for you about it?
I think the market system we've already sort of waxed poetical on, but that's the highlight of the game for me. And I would say the scoring of the cities and the scoring of the buildings, I should say, and the scoring of the mines are fairly generic scorings. But there is another really interesting area of scoring in the game, which relates to these, what did we say?
Veins or something.
Politicians.
Oh,
The patrons.
Patrons. There are 4 colors of patron, and the way that they get first added to the board and then installed in their positions of power to score recurring points in the final 3 rounds.
we haven't
of the
talked
game.
about public buildings, which is what they come from.
That's true. Maybe we should start
Well,
there.
how about why don't we even go a little bit further back? So one thing I enjoy that in this city builder game, there's a 3-step process to building your building. First, you have to plot a piece of land. You basically, there's like a grid. You put like a cube out and you're like, I want to build here.
And there's restrictions on that.
And there's restrictions. You have to build around a building, you know? And so you're thinking about like which building am I going to build around? Because there's synergies that you can get. Scoring synergies, nothing else beyond that. Scoring synergies by building in proper areas. So you have to take an action to choose a space. Then you have to choose an action to basically acquire a building from the market, but that comes into your player board. And then a third action to put it out onto the board. And so like that 3-step process means that there's like a huge amount of tempo you have to pay attention to. And like there's timing on when you do each one of those steps and how you do it. And since they cost money, you're also paying attention to the market. So I really like that flow for establishing a city.
Just to say, in a 4-player game, you're going to get 25 actions over the course of the game, and every building you build is going to take 3 of them, right?
Yeah. So the buildings that you can build, we've mentioned before, you can build your buildings that belong to your guild. So if you're in the beer guild, you can build taverns and stuff. So you can build those. But there are these public buildings that anyone can build, and they're more expensive. And when you build the public buildings, that brings patrons into the town often. And the patrons are the things that are going to set you up for scoring.
Right. And it has other big effects. And usually there's a lot of scoring synergies for having the proper building next to a public building.
Right. There's a lot of stuff in the game that's like, oh, if you build
almost
your
like
building,
suburbia style scoring, a little bit of what you're next to, and you're matching up some icons, which is some of the least interesting part of the game, but it's probably necessary. Public buildings, I think, are so interesting in the sense of like you get some very small instant rewards back from building them. So, some
some of
but
them are
mostly you're
significant.
contributing to the city and kind of setting up what is going to be scored at the end,
Yeah.
whether it's on the map in terms of the icons that are going to line up, or these patrons which are going to say, hey, we're in this particular game, we're really going to reward people that have contributed heavily to the mine and have gone all the way down, and built in all 4 levels of the mine. Like there's a lot of stuff that's maybe not as obvious at first in the decisions of the public buildings you build. And even then they're not necessarily helping you. A lot of times the thing that's going to help you in terms of icons is not generating the patron that you want.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've set it up properly where you're.
Yeah, they're not rewarding you for doing the thing you already want to do generally,
Yeah, because each page, there's like 4 different types of patrons, and as the patrons arrive in the city, they have the potential to like basically activate scoring goals that will, the scoring goals will hit in the latter rounds of the game. It'll be things like, if you have for each one of your guild buildings or one of your buildings that's next to a public building, you'll get points based on the patrons that are out there. And so I do enjoy a game where we are crafting
the scoring system.
Because A, it's fun to do that, but B, then once you if you want to go hard on something that you're doing well at, but then you're also telegraphing this is what I want to score points for, so then people are going to maybe come and try to disrupt you
or leech.
Yeah. So it creates a really interesting dynamic. But in this game, what's also interesting though is that if I put out a public building with a hope to then have a patron be a scoring condition, there still is another major hurdle before it actually comes into fruition, right?
Right. And you want to get these installed as early as you can, these patrons, because they can score up to 3 times in a game. But getting one installed and scoring off it by round 3 is very difficult.
Wait, can you describe what you have to do to get the patron in?
You have to take an income action and then spend 10 money to install them.
And
which could be very expensive.
Right. And so I think there's an element you can do it all yourself, but there's an element of the game where you can say hey, let's do this together. In fact, when we played, you guys had kind of a game of chicken going on with this. I'm not going to install this patron because I think Trey is going to be it matters more to Trey. So I'm not going to spend 10 of my precious dollars.
Yeah, Jordan soft skilled me successfully where he did not pay for it.
At the end, we both had more than $10 left over. Yeah. So it wouldn't have mattered. But
my natural cheapness did not bode well there. I think I left some points on the table because I didn't want you to get away with not paying for something that I thought you should pay for. But to me, that's interesting, right? Of hey, here's this collective thing that we could both benefit from, but one of us actually has to spend the money. And so is there a deal to be made there? And I don't know, I'm often kind of trying to trade a currency that doesn't actually exist in the game. I was trying to do this last night in Nucleum with Chris, if you do this and you actually trigger my tile here, I know it doesn't benefit you that much, but I will owe you one. There's an Oski.
There's an Oski.
There's an Oski, and that's better than gold.
But also, as Jordan mentioned, there's only you have a limited number of actions, and you're already spending so many just to build buildings. So if you can just not spend as many actions on things. So if someone else can put that patron in for you, then that's actually really important because that's one less action. Not only save money, but you don't have to take an income action when you don't want to.
Right. I will say there's a really nice element of this too, where oftentimes public buildings will sit on our player boards for a few turns before they'll be built. But if you look around and see, okay, if Trey builds his public building, that's going to add a yellow patron. And Ben also has a yellow patron sitting in his supply. Maybe it makes sense for me to get into the scoring provided by yellow patrons, which I think relates to the mines now, and set myself up so that when those are built, I can go in, install them, and immediately benefit off them.
But then what happens is also sometimes if you're doing well in a certain condition, people will be oh, we're not going to do that scoring condition. We're not going to do that because you're going to benefit from it so much more than we are.
They might not pay for the patron, but if they've already reserved the public building tile, they're likely to still build the public building.
Right.
And you can often look and see like, oh, I know where that public building's going
Right.
too. So I think that's in terms of like non-head down play, paying attention to other people's boards and the buildings they've queued up is incredibly important in this game. This is a game of mini alliances, whether it's, for example, hey, we have this scoring condition in common, Jordan. Let's team up and flog it as we did in one game. There's also almost like a negative mini alliance that takes place is like if you and I have the same guild in common. Yes, we can both build taverns, but all we're really doing is driving the price down. So sometimes,
that's I love the guild system in this game because I love games that do a push pull. This is one of the reasons why I love Praga Caput Regni, which is that also takes place in Czechia. By the way, big. Right, like this one takes place in Czechia, and then Prague is also featured in Nucleum. So, like, it's Prague, the region. Wow, is just blowing up right now.
Golem, that's another game that takes place in Prague.
I mean, I guess it helps that we have all these designers that are from that area. But what I love about the guild system, and I haven't played it at 2 players, so I know at 2 players, everyone you don't share guilds. Like you're just like,
so at
I'm
2,
the wood.
there's no overlap.
Right.
At 3, you have 1 guild all to yourself, and then 2 of your 3 overlap. And then at 4, all 3 of your guilds overlap with someone else.
So I love a push pull where a game says, "Oh, when you put this down, you're going to get a benefit, but this benefit has is either works against whatever you just did or has no relation to it." So like as you flog this system, you're improving something else, but you can't do that other thing because you're too busy flogging the system, which is something that happens all over Praga, Caput Regni. And in this game, I feel like you see this thing with the guilds, which is that when you have a guild, you want to build buildings of that guild because it's going to increase how effective you are when you take an income action. So like if I build several beer buildings, when I take an income, I will get like
You're creating a lot of
money.
beer.
Right.
You're
creating
making a lot of beer.
I'm making a lot of beer, and I'm going to make a lot of money theoretically from that beer. But what happens is, as you build these buildings, you are driving the price down. But
This is a big supply.
which is right. But then the thing is, though, as you build these buildings, you're taking a little house off your player board and putting it into that center area. And as you pluck houses off your player board, you're actually getting really important bonuses, like
And better ones as you build in the same guild repeatedly.
Exactly. So the game is encouraging you to flog, but as you flog, you're driving down the price of whatever it is that you're flogging, which means that even though you're increasing your ability to have a great income, since you're lowering the price of that good so much, when you get the income, it'll be a subpar income, even though you can. It's just
Which
one
is
of
a
those
great
things-
expression of a market.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really clever, it's a clever situation because then you want to kind of you want to sort of do it just right. And then you think about things like, well, maybe I spam out all these buildings earlier in the game. So that way the price goes
You
down.
need income.
You need income, like get it out right away. And then as the population grows, then I'll have like really good income later on,
Yeah.
you know?
We should say as well that only 4 of each building type can be built. There's only 4 of each building in the game. And you have 4 buildings in each of your rows. So if you want to get the most valuable reward, you have to build all 4 of those buildings or take an
There's a few cheats.
There's some
Yeah.
cheats, but for the most part, you have to build all 4. That's very hard to do because your opponent must be building none of them.
But then that's the other
That's
thing
right.
is
They
that
have to kind of neglect.
you don't want to build these buildings too quickly because you're going to crater the price of whatever good you're making and you're going to make less money with income. However, if so you sort of let me pace this out. But if you are if there's 2 of you who are going for the same buildings and one is going for one of the buildings that you're but I need that benefit so badly, I need to reserve this building now because otherwise I could be screwed later. So you're there's a lot of urgency in building those buildings. So there's a tremendous, the guild system is just so clever and smart to me. I really love it.
It's very good. Yeah.
And I think maybe to summarize what you're saying, to me, this creates a very social game where you have this interesting push pull that I still don't fully understand a lot of times, other than I think you can kind of simplify as typically you want to build what the city needs. If there's a high price on a good and you can build it, you're going to drive the price down a little bit, but you're going to be making a lot of it. So that's good income. But we are all, it's a weird push pull with all of the players, which I think is really interesting and delicious.
And the guilds also have
delicious. And again, damn it.
The
delicious.
guilds also have like an interesting thing, right? Like I feel like they all have an interesting hook. Like if you're in the wood guild, you're actually not going to make a huge amount from income, but you can control how quickly
Costs.
people build,
Yeah.
right?
That's one, I think, actually potential downside of the game is wood is so significant. So if you're one of the 2 players who has control over wood, you have a lot of power over the price of the most important action will be taking over the game. You know, which
And
is
the
building.
timing of
And
that
the timing of
sometimes
that,
feels random.
well, if you don't have control of the wood guild, it feels super random when all of a sudden, you know, on your turn, you took an income action, you're ready for your next turn to come around so that you can build a 12 wood building at a cost of 2, and now the cost is 3.
Right.
Like that is brutal. And so that I think wood is, you're right, it doesn't give you much income, but it gives you a lot of control, and maybe it's too important.
But then the mining guild is also strong, right? Because it gives you a lot of power and flexibility with going into the mines. Like you can basically go in there for free, right? And you can also get like really nice mine income off of that as well.
Right.
So that gives, I mean, it does not the same amount of power, but like I just feel like different guilds have interesting upsides to them.
And I will say, I mean, so just for comparison purposes, like food and beer are just money. They have no
They-
other
they
power in
play
the game,
pretty
but they're the
similarly.
most valuable. And the other thing that's interesting is when you start the game, you randomly draw a card that creates, you know, if you're playing a 4-player game, 4 groups of 3 guilds, and then you draft those in reverse turn order. So there might be a question about how balanced those cards are, but we're not really at the point to comment on that. But it's really interesting, you know, if you're the first to draft, you can look around and say, okay, I could get wood and maybe the mining guild, and I'll have a lot of control over these 2 aspects of the game, but less income. Or I can go for
and you're going to base that decision upon the flip of the buildings that were in the market.
maybe.
I think you're looking at those buildings in determining which ones you draft a lot of times, like what's available there, which may not be obvious on your first play.
Sure.
But it's
But I
gonna be
love these pre-game drafts. They're so interesting, right?
The patent guild determines the price of patents, and you need to spend patents in order to reserve buildings. Do you feel like that has control in the same, like that one can control the tempo of people buying patents the way that would with controls the way that people build buildings?
Less, because the cheapest building patents always cost $1 regardless of the patent price, whereas wood is always wood. You know, it's
Right, like you still have to
tied to
pay the
market,
wood to do it. I think
It plays differently. I'm glad it plays differently. It doesn't seem as crucial as wood, and wood seems like really important, especially at the beginning. Where like the opposite of what you're saying. There's times where I've delayed building because I'm looking across the table and it's like, it looks like Matt's about to build a wood building. Really would be nice to have a 2 cost for my building rather than a 3 cost. That will make a big difference. So I might delay here, but
Right,
then he
and-
won't, or I don't know.
And importantly, there's certainty around that. If Matt builds a building for wood, the wood price will go down.
Yeah.
Right. Every time a new building is built, the price goes down, which is cool.
how do you feel about the St. Barbara Cathedral element?
I think one criticism I saw was that for your first play, you may not understand how powerful some of the actions on the Santa Barbara. This is a cathedral that's being built, and there's about 14 different
11.
11 tiles that you can kind of access by. You've completed certain public buildings, done certain things that give you basically the ability to construct a stage of the cathedral. And these different stages have rewards that are of very different power levels, I would say. They kind of ramp up as you go, but these are major.
They're huge.
Sometimes it's like take 2 mining actions at no cost, which can be gigantic later in the game. So, being able to take these Santa Barbara actions, I don't think it's something you can really neglect in the game. And so there should be a lot of like racing and jostling to get some of these rewards here. Whether that's interesting or not, it's really important and you can't neglect it. So, and there's sometimes where it feels like, oh, I wanted to get this thing, and then somebody built an action on the board, which caused that tile to flip because it just raised taxes.
Right.
Yeah, because like sometimes with this cathedral, like things get flipped by either someone taking an action and like they are themselves building that part of the cathedral, but sometimes it's like you build a public building and the public building causes the thing on the cathedral to flip over, which then isn't that where
I think it's usually actually on either food or breweries. It might only be on food.
Oh, maybe food and brew. So
Yeah.
maybe so interesting.
So there's
so maybe,
power over Santa Barbara with food. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, that
There's some
probably is
interesting little relationships there, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, because actually the public buildings often give you these Pelican tokens, and the Pelican tokens are the things you have to spend in order to do a Santa Barbara action. And so I've found that in the games I've played, there have been moments where someone was really setting themselves up for a bonus, and then someone just builds, like, without a Santa Barbara action, they do something else that causes it to turn over, and
They're not even intentionally
and they get so
blocking.
mad.
It's just random. Hey, I just took your key to your entire game just went away.
But then there was also a moment too with the Santa Barbara where I think maybe you were saying it. I had an action where you said, Ben, if you do this thing, you're basically gonna turn over you're gonna construct part of Santa Barbara and set Trey up for this amazing bonus. Do you really want to do that?
Yeah.
And I said, sure.
You said, I will not be manipulated by you.
But later on, like, with more plays, that'll be more significant. We'll be making more decisions around.
But again,
think
I
it's a great system.
like that kind
Yeah,
of
it's
thing.
really
Like,
cool.
just to understand what you're doing here is you're handing Trey this big Santa
Right,
Barbara
right.
action. If you do that, Ben, like I think some people object to that kind of level of table talk. I think I always enjoy it.
I think that's that's the fun.
Yeah,
right.
totally.
I was gonna say that I think like probably my biggest positive on this game, I love the market and everything. I just love how it all is interconnected so well. And just everything from the player board to Santa Barbara to the mines to the city building, and everything just seems to weave together very cleanly. And it's thematically clean. I'm just like really impressed. It's not like, oh, I built this thing and it causes some of Santa Barbara to be constructed.
Everything's connected.
It's like it's causes Santa Barbara to be connected because you have sold so much meat at your butcher that I'm assuming you have now you've generated income in the city, and
You've
the city
increased
can
the
do
population, so more people are available to work on the cathedral.
Like it's just like it all makes sense what you're doing, and I am so
a brilliant system,
impressed with how all these pieces work together.
Yeah, it feels like finely tuned craft work where everything causes some other cascading effect. And when you get to a certain level of play with the game, I imagine you'll be doing a lot of that intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trey, are there some things in this game that you would like to see more fleshed out a bit more, or maybe some things that didn't quite work for you?
I think there's plenty of room for expansion, right? Like you could easily see some kind of expansion where you start to randomize the tiles in Santa Barbara. Like that could have some, or not just the order, but in terms of like what it offers, or something like that. I think there's probably some room for that.
Almost like a new Agricola
there.
deck. Like, oh, you have a new No, it's not the Church of Santa Barbara. Now it's the Church of something else.
I think
It's like a different set of tiles. Like,
right.
I think it's a really interesting system. I think one thing I worry about in the game is like I've really been enjoying it. Is it going to start to feel samey at 10 plays? I think there might be a potential for sameness. Like the random setup may not be random enough. I'm wondering, especially because like all those Santa Barbara tiles are the same and it's the same progression every time. And like one minor concern is that there may not be enough points in the mine, in the actual like area majority at the end. It seems like those points feel a little underpowered. Like the points in the cities in my play so far have kind of dwarfed the points in the mine, but that I've not played enough to know if that's actually true or not.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's sort of player choice because the points in the mine are determined by playing out mine tiles that have stars on them, but you'll usually draw more than one mine tile, and oftentimes there will be mines with powerful actions that have no stars. So the points don't go up, but instead you're taking these powerful
You're increasing
actions.
your engine, yeah.
Right. So it's kind of an interesting aspect.
But a lot of times when I'm placing I'm placing some big star token, I'm looking and saying like, oh, this is going to be worth 2 points.
Sure.
It felt a little, sometimes it feels a little underwhelming.
And especially if you're going into that mine hoping to get some sort of like income or whatever, and then your income doesn't go up. It's just, you get like stars, this is just going to translate to like a point at the end of the game is like a little, I feel like the mine is, the mine's not like bad. I think it's one of the less interesting things to do. I don't know why it's not quite as fun. But like, by the way, this is like a quibble version of that. 'Cause it's still fun. It's still good. And there's still interesting stuff to do in the mine. But for some reason, it just doesn't seem to be as like exciting and thrilling as working on the city for me.
I agree. I think mine's a little more boring. I think the mine patron that you can install adds a lot of extra scoring to the mine. And so maybe if you want to go that route and have a big mine strategy, you also need to install
This
that
is one of those notes that we've
like
had
that.
after a few plays where we don't know enough about it. But I think you were talking about a 3-player game where you played with Tom, where Tom went heavy into the mine, like built, 2 different 4-layered things and was getting reward for the scoring. It's like, oh, it seems like he had a really great mine game. And he came in second, was kind of
but he was scoring 12 points a turn by the final turn of the game.
Wow.
Which is a lot. I will say in a 3-player game too, the game feels really different because there's a whole nother round of play. You play 6 rounds instead of 5. So you personally have more development on the board.
Yeah. I still haven't played 3. I would guess, I'm not saying that 3 is a bad game, but 4 is where this game feels like it's at its most socially interesting.
Yeah.
And I played the 2 and it was not socially interesting, but it was all just like, oh, I can't wait to play this with more people. Because when you have no competition over the buildings, you're actually quite constrained about what you can do.
Right.
So it's a very different game at 2. And I'm not saying it's a bad game, but it's a very different game at 2. I think I would only want to play it at 4. 3 might be okay, but I think the things that I like about the game are going to be most present in the 4.
I would give 3 a try once. I hear you and I agree. There's more interaction over the guilds because you're competing on every guild at 4, and at 3 you have 1 to yourself. But there is more potential to set up your own scoring conditions in a 3-player game because there's 4 rounds of scoring from patrons instead of 3, and you can ramp up more. And so if that's part of the game you enjoy is building your own scoring conditions and then meeting them, you can have more opportunities to do that in a 3-player game.
That's less interactive.
Not necessarily, because if someone else is building more of the green patrons, then you need to get into green, and there's more time for you to do that. There's more of an arc around the scoring conditions. Maybe
Saying when we played the last time, we even though it was contentious, we did have certain alliances, whether we intended them or not, in terms of the scoring. I think that's going to be most present in the 4, rather than, like you said, I'm setting up my own scoring conditions that only I can benefit from. That's not something that can happen in the 4-player game.
Yeah. By the way, one thing that we didn't mention that I do like, I know we're in the quibbles section, but one thing I do like when talking about mining is that as the more someone mines, the more the price of silver goes up. So the value of ore goes down and the value of silver goes up. And then the more that the supply of silver goes down, the more the value of ore goes up. They're inversely related, which I just think is a fun interplay between the players that are involved with those guilds. It's just another smart design quirk, just another clever thing just to throw in there, which I appreciate. But I think for me, my biggest quibble, and again, all quibbles, because I think this is really an excellent game, is that with the city scoring at the end of the game, you basically are trying to line up icons. So every building has certain icons on it. And so, you get points that say, if you have a red icon on your building, then you're going to get a point for every red icon that's surrounding your building orthogonally. And then maybe you might have multiple, you might have a red and a yellow. So you get points for red and yellows around it. So it makes sense. And it makes sense as a basic scoring thing. It's not a tricky thing to understand. And you can, it weighs in on your decisions. It's good in terms of what my decision is, but it just feels like in a game where everything feels very well thought out and thematic, that this sort of okay, match icons, align icons feels like an afterthought to me. And I wish that it was either something more interesting, or if they had found a way to make that thematically work more. Instead of icons, maybe they represented, maybe as roads or people or citizens or something like that. So that way you feel oh, I connected this half of the farm to that half of the farm. I put this house together with that house. I don't know what it was. They could have visually made it make sense in the larger narrative of the game.
Right? What those represent. I agree.
They're probably in the rules.
I think it's necessary. For the map to matter, those icons need to be present. And what I've in my play so far, there's times where those icons kind of line up where like, oh, the right building came up for me and I can buy it and I'm going to score a lot of points with this. And then there's other times where like none of these buildings are going there's no buildings for me to buy that will be rewarded with the correct icons. So sometimes it just kind of works out. I agree. That's like my least favorite thing in the game, but I also think it's necessary for the relationship in the map part of the city to be there. And that's part of the real estate game, which is very contentious, by the way. You know, we haven't really explained it, but you know, where you can place down your plots to control the real estate is actually constrained by like, you can't just place them anywhere. You're quite constrained. And so there is some almost like abstract strategy bits of when do you reserve certain plots so that you can score them later or benefit from other people's buildings. Like that matters. It's another, by the way, it's another bit of load. Like the AP in this can be significant.
And I just want to say, by the way, that in our recent play, there was a situation where there was a prime spot of real estate. But I had a Pelican token and there was a prime bonus on the cathedral. And if I went for the real estate, I would be letting, I think you, Trey, grab the bonus from St. Barbara. And I was like, okay, I've got to decide between the real estate and Santa Barbara right now. And I chose Santa Barbara, and then Jordan got this amazing piece of real estate. And then ultimately, actually, that real estate was probably worth much more.
And Jordan won that game by a point.
That's
now
right.
we know why.
Yeah,
that's all thanks to Ben.
But it was
Ben.
But it was an example of, again, like I had to look around the table. I saw what Trey could possibly get, and then I had to decide what's best for me. Yada yada yada.
That's good,
which was good. But yeah, so just
I want to play devil's advocate on this icon system too.
Okay,
But do you
all
have
right,
more to
sure.
say about it, Trey?
No. It's certainly not my favorite thing. I do think it seems like it's necessary. Is this the best version of it? No, I'm like you. I think it should be more thematic, especially because like the icons are kind of independent of the type of buildings. Like we have this
they probably
whole
represent something.
We have
like,
this reference sheet that kind of shows you like, okay, here's the different icons that are available with all the
I'm
buildings.
sure one means science and one means like whatever has this quality or that quality.
But it feels a little Trismegistus.
It does. The theme of it doesn't really make sense. I agree. But I think the system is simplified and it gets out of your way to allow you to think about scoring opportunities and for placement to matter. But the game of placement mattering of when do I build this plot?
Yeah.
Oh, if I want to build a plot here, I need to wait for Ben to build this building next to it first. This plot is only $4 now, but if I let Ben build that building there first, it's going to cost me $10 instead.
Right.
There's a really interesting game around
Sequencing,
sequencing, getting the right building tiles, getting the icons to match. And I will say, Trey, you were saying it sometimes feels kind of random which building tiles you get and whether the icons match. But when I'm playing the game, I'm thinking about I'm already thinking about how am I going to get my icons to match? I need to get a row of 3 buildings or 4 buildings next to each other so I can generate big points there. And I'm looking at which public buildings will let me do that, which buildings in my guild will let me do that. And all of that information is on this little player aid guide that they give to the players so that you can make those plans. And I think that having a simple system that you can engage with to find the scoring you need is a really good thing. And I also think it's telling that they give you that player aid and they don't give you a player aid that says when our price is going to go up. They're like, this is where your attention should be. We're going to give you this so that you can find your point scoring. And that's how they want you to play the game. And so I think the system works really well, although I do agree the theme is not quite there.
It's all about sequencing. And I feel like, I know we're in the quibble section, but I feel like we actually have not given its due, like the card system. I think that actually the card play is really good in this game. There have been many times where I'm like, okay, this is what my sequence is going to be. Oh no, I don't have that action anymore because I decided to flog building or something like that. And so like on top of every single thing you're talking about, you're also trying to figure out how do I make sure I have the cards that I need, like the actions that I need, which actions am I going to sacrifice? Or if you want to make a pivot and then it's like, I can't make that pivot anymore because I stupidly used ink. Like I
think everybody has that playing the game. Like, oh, I used the wrong card.
So like on top of everything else, it's just the way you actually play the game is really fun, and I feel like it's a really good distillation of it reminds me of Voidfall. It reminds me of a very simple Voidfall, where Voidfall you're going to play a card and you can take 2 of the 3 actions, and when you play that card, you're sort of now that action's out, and so now what future actions are like, oh no, I want to do this and then this sequence, but I lost that other action because it's on that card. So we have that a little bit here in a way that I find really satisfying.
Completely.
But the one thing I want to ask you about, Jordan, though, that Trey, you brought up, variability, sameness. You played this game more than us. And I feel like we've had conversations where you start to say you're starting to see it be, is it repetitive or is it samey or no?
I think it is kind of samey game after game. There's not a ton of variability. I think the only variability is which guilds do you have, which can be impactful, and also the starting mine setup, which is not that interesting or important. So it does feel a little samey game after game, but maybe as we continue to play, we'll find more routes for player interaction that will spice up the game a little bit. And, maybe we'll also find that interaction on the church will spice up the game from game to game.
They do have like 20 different cards for the setup, right? Of like how the guilds can be mixed up. So there's no like perfect cocktail or anything like that. But some of the fear is that the kind of push-pull of this game ends up constraining things into kind of a samey experience sometimes. Like, because there is that tough thing was like, oh, hey, beer's trading really high. I should build some beer. It's like, well, now I just reduced the price. Like it does have this like balloon-like envelope effect that pulls everything towards the center in a lot of ways that might make things similar. It's tough. Like I kind of had a theory in this game one time of like, hey, how are you can be runaway in this game, like having a high income, good things are going to happen when you have a high income. Like there's a little bit of a runaway leader thing. Like I saw that game I played, David had a great income early on and just ran it to victory. No problem. But what was my point here? Is victory sometimes be like, can you be like, I'm the guy who built food and no one else ever built food? Like when you can be like, if you can work out that no one ever contested you in an area, like that's a way to do really well. And so like sometimes your success is not, you don't control your own success. It's whether someone kind of got in your way or not. I don't think that's actually true because I think we saw Dimitri monopolize food in his game and it did not necessarily mean victory, but it seemed like he was doing very well early on and just failed to convert it into points.
I think you have to monopolize early. I think you have to, if you're going to do that, you have to monopolize early so that way you get all the benefits from your player board, but also so that way when you destroy the value, there's time for it to rebound and then you can have like a huge income later. But interestingly, the game has some stuff we haven't talked about with the market, which is that like it prevents spamming of buildings. Like a lot of times, like if you put out like sometimes if you put out a second kind of like maybe a second wood building, but the population is still small, the game will say, okay, no more wood buildings are allowed to be put out right now until the population grows. And then there's also that thing where like if a certain building has not been built and the population is growing too much,
it'll auto build.
It auto builds, which is cool too. So you can't hold back on building to drive up prices. The game will force that building to be built. So like some cool little AI
cool system.
Definitely.
I feel like any final thoughts, Jordan? What are your final thoughts on this game?
I have one more positive we haven't touched on yet, which is I really love the 2 actions. So every round you're going to take 2 actions on your turn, then 2 actions, then 1 action. And I just wanted to talk about it for 1 second because it's almost PAX-like. When you have 2 actions, you can build a wood building, lower the wood price, and then build another building, guaranteeing yourself that lower wood price. Or you can get a Pelican token and then go to Santa Barbara and immediately activate it. So if you're sequencing your actions properly, you can benefit from taking 2 actions simultaneously. And I think that's a really cool touch as well. So all told, I think it's a great system. Like I said, it feels like clockwork. Everything works really well together and it's super interesting. And the question is whether there's enough variability to carry the game from something that we liked but stopped playing in 2023 or in early 2024, or something that continually hits the table like in Agricola. But the game itself is really enjoyable, and the systems,
it's not marvelous. Built for replayability the way Agricola is.
Right, it's not.
And if I get 10 plays out of this game, great. Like, I think this is a very strong recommendation for me. I mean, and my quibbles about replayability, like I'm not there yet. And that may even be, I may be wrong, about that too. It's such an interesting space.
I could also see an expansion, just
Easily.
like blowing up the replayability, like the way that the Red Cathedral expansion sort of lets you just sort of plug in different modules, and all of a sudden you have a whole different game. I can see like a module type of thing being thrown in here, not just like another cathedral, but maybe different guilds or maybe different interactions or who knows what, different scoring conditions for the patrons. But like there definitely could be room.
Yeah, the
for-
load of this game is not unmanageable. It is a little AP producing because you're considering a lot of things. But if they added one more layer to the game for experienced players in expansion, it would be just fine.
I think it's just like it's a really, really just sharp design. Like we said, everything works like clockwork. I've said it before on this podcast that I was really impressed that, there have definitely been games we played that work really hard to make lots of different systems come together, and it feels a little sweaty. It feels like games have to add in a layer of rules just to get different concepts to come together. And here they all mesh well, and you sit there and you learn the rules and you're like, oh my God, there's so much going on. But when you start to play, it just is so smooth. And actually, my experience has been that the games are relatively quick. So the play time is pretty good. And I think it has a beautiful mix of social interaction and city building and economy. And even though this is a quote unquote city builder, it doesn't really feel like a city builder to me. It feels like an economic game, and the city is sort of like a manifestation of the economy to me. So therefore, because if it's a city builder, I usually come in with a whole different set of standards that I can't help. Like I need to have a SimCity experience, and this is not that.
No, this is not that.
But I don't care at all because I think the economy is really so fun, and it just moves. Just glides along. So I don't know about the replayability, but I've pre-ordered it, and I can't wait for my copy to come in. I think it's one of the best of the year in my mind.
I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. There's 3 games that came out of Essen that were sort of touted as being the big ones, right? Nucleum, Kutna Ora, and Evacuation. And so it'll be interesting. You guys are going to talk about Evacuation soon, but it'll be interesting in, maybe in early January to do a little, what was the best game of Essen? We'll do our best of the year as well. So that's kind of
This will be in that discussion.
Yeah.
I think it will. For me, this will be in the discussion. Evacuation will be in the discussion. And the question is for me, which one do I like more, this one or Evacuation? I think I know my answer, but they are.
Stay tuned.
That's a little tease. Well, I think that sums up everything about Kutna Hora, and I think that sums up everything on the podcast. So, thanks guys for being here, and you've been listening to Game Brain, produced and edited by Matthew Robinson, Tom Donnelly, Trey Alsop, and Ben Mandelker. Special thanks to Daedalus for our incredible music. More on Daedalus at GameBrainPod.com, and thanks to Edamar Peleg for our incredible graphics. Be sure to check him out on Instagram at Kerbuloni or his website Kerbuloni.com. You can reach us by email at contact@GameBrainPod.com. Do that for that soul giveaway. And thanks for listening, and go play some games with friends or make some friends with games.